The air in the trauma bay at Metropolis General was a symphony of managed chaos. The sharp, rhythmic beeping of heart monitors provided the percussion. The hiss and sigh of ventilators were the woodwinds. The hurried, squeaking shoes of nurses on linoleum floors were the frantic strings. And over it all, the occasional shouted order from a doctor was the jarring brass. It was a sound Nurse Alara Vance had learned to fade into the background, a constant hum beneath her own quiet existence. She moved through this world like a ghost, her presence barely registering. Her light brown hair was always pulled back in a severe, functional bun. Her blue scrubs seemed a size too large, designed to obscure rather than fit. Her eyes were perpetually fixed on the floor, on her task list, on anything but the direct gaze of another person. She was the new nurse, the slow nurse, the one who seemed to fuddle the simplest tasks. Right now, it was an IV bag.
Her fingers, which felt thick and clumsy, struggled with the sterile packaging. She could feel the impatience radiating from Dr. Evans, a sycophant who orbited the department's brilliant tyrannical son, Chief of Surgery, Alistair Finch. Dr. Evans sighed dramatically, a sound designed for an audience. "Can we get that saline drip sometime today, Vance? The patient isn't getting any less dehydrated." A few of the other nurses snickered. Alara's cheeks flushed a dull, painful red. "Sorry, doctor. The packaging is stuck." Her voice was a murmur, almost an apology for existing. She finally ripped the plastic open, her knuckles brushing against the IV stand and causing it to wobble. A collective groan went through the small group of onlookers. She avoided their eyes, focusing on the transparent tube, the clear fluid, the mechanics of it all. Just a task. One foot in front of the other. One task after another. That was how you survived the day. This hospital was meant to be a quiet place for her. A place to disappear. After the noise, the dust, the screaming, the concussive blasts that still echoed in her dreams, the sterile, predictable environment of a civilian hospital had seemed like a sanctuary. She had been wrong. The battlefield had been honest in its cruelty. This place was different. The wounds here were inflicted with whispers, with dismissive glances, with targeted professional humiliation. It was a slower kind of bleeding, but it was bleeding all the same. She kept her sleeves pulled down low, well over her wrists, a habit so ingrained she no longer noticed it. They covered the faint, silvery traceries of old scars, but they were really there to hide the more prominent one, a puckered, angry welt of tissue on her left forearm. A reminder of the day the noise had become too much. "Is there a problem here?" The voice cut through the air like a scalpel. It was deep, resonant, and coated in a layer of absolute, unshakable authority. Dr. Alistair Finch had arrived. He didn't walk into a room, he took possession of it. Tall, impeccably dressed in custom-tailored scrubs that actually looked good on him, with silver hair at his temples that he thought made him look distinguished, he was a god in this small kingdom. He was also a sadist. Dr. Evans immediately straightened up, his demeanor shifting from cruel overseer to eager puppy. "No problem, Chief. Just trying to get Nurse Vance up to speed." The implication was clear. She was the problem. Finch's cold blue eyes swept over Alara, a flicker of profound irritation crossing his handsome face. It was the look one might give a piece of faulty equipment. "Vance," he said, the name itself an accusation. "The patient in trauma 2. Lacerated femoral artery. I need a DeBakey clamp. Now." He didn't wait for an answer, already turning his attention to the chart in his hand, dismissing her as he had commanded her. Alara nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, doctor." She practically fled to the supply closet, her heart pounding a dull, anxious rhythm against her ribs. DeBakey clamp. She knew where it was. The closet was a chaotic mess, instruments and supplies shoved onto shelves with little regard for order. It was another one of her unofficial duties, tidying up after everyone else. Her hands scanned the shelves. Forceps, retractors, scalpels. She pushed aside a box of sutures. Where was it? She could hear Finch's voice growing louder in the bay, his impatience a palpable force. "Vance, do you plan on forging the clamp yourself? Or do I need to send a search party?" Laughter followed his comment, sharp and cruel. It pricked at her skin. Her hand started to tremble slightly. She hated this. She hated the feeling of being useless, of being watched and judged.
Her fingers finally closed around the cold, stainless steel of the clamp. She pulled it out, her relief so potent it made her dizzy. She rushed back into the trauma bay, her sneakers squeaking in her haste. She held it out to him, her hand shaking. Finch didn't take it. He stared at her outstretched hand, then back at her face, his lip curled in a sneer. "You're shaking. Are you scared of a little blood, nurse?" He finally snatched the clamp from her grasp, his fingers deliberately brushing hers with a cold, dismissive touch. He turned to the patient on the gurney, a man bleeding profusely from a wound in his thigh, and went to work. His hands were a blur of motion, precise, economical, brilliant. He was a master of his craft, and he knew it. That was the most infuriating part. He was a great surgeon. He was just a terrible human being. Alara tried to make herself small, to blend into the background again. She began cleaning up the discarded packaging from the IV supplies, her movements slow and deliberate. But Finch wasn't done with her. After masterfully placing the clamp and stemming the bleeding, he turned, wiping his gloved hands on a sterile cloth. He looked directly at Brenda, the senior charge nurse. "Brenda, I want her off my floor." He gestured with his chin toward Alara, not even deigning to look at her directly. "She is a liability. Her incompetence is going to get someone killed one day. Relegate her to inventory, or janitorial duties. I don't care. Just get her out of my sight." The words landed like physical blows. The entire trauma team fell silent, watching. Alara stood frozen, a piece of plastic wrap clutched in her hand. Brenda, a veteran nurse who had seen everything, just gave a tight, almost imperceptible nod. She wouldn't challenge Finch. No one ever did. Her job was more important than a new nurse's dignity. Chloe, a younger nurse who had always been kind to Alara, shot her a look of deep sympathy, but she too remained silent. To speak up was to paint a target on your own back. Finch looked at Alara one last time, a look of triumphant disgust on his face. Then he physically shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, not enough to make her fall, but it was decisive. A firm push on her shoulder that sent her stumbling back a step, out of the inner circle of medical activity. It was a gesture of utter contempt, an act of expulsion. "Out," he repeated, his voice low and menacing. Alara's eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. She turned without a word and walked away from the trauma bay, the sound of their work resuming behind her, as if she had never been there at all. She was a ghost once more. The rest of her shift was a blur of quiet misery. Brenda, looking guilty, had assigned her to restock the supply closets on the third floor. It was mindless, solitary work, counting gauze pads, checking expiration dates on saline bags, organizing suture kits. Each task was a small, smooth stone she could hold in her mind, focusing on its texture to keep from thinking about the burning humiliation. She worked methodically, her movements becoming more fluid and efficient now that no one was watching. The clumsy, hesitant nurse was a performance, a shield. Here, alone, her hands moved with an innate grace and purpose that she actively suppressed when she was around others. The quiet was broken by the overhead speaker. "Code Blue, Emergency Department. Code Blue, Emergency Department." A fresh wave of chaos had arrived. Alara paused, her hand hovering over a box of catheters. She felt a pang of something she couldn't name, a desire to be there, a need to be useful. But Finch's voice echoed in her head. Out. She was banished. She went back to counting. But then the call came again, more frantic this time. "All available surgical staff to the ER, stat. All available surgical staff to the ER, stat." That was unusual. A code blue was standard. A call for all hands on deck meant something big, something bad. Curiosity, or perhaps a deeper, more professional instinct, got the better of her. She quietly put down the box and made her way back toward the emergency department, staying in the less trafficked corridors, a shadow moving along the walls. She arrived to a scene of controlled pandemonium. Paramedics had just wheeled in a gurney. On it was a man. He was a mess of blood, dirt, and torn clothing. The initial report, shouted by a breathless paramedic, was a structural collapse at a downtown construction site. The man had no ID, no wallet, nothing. A John Doe. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and erratic. Finch was there, of course, taking center stage. He strode toward the gurney, his team parting before him like the Red Sea.
Finch did a quick, almost cursory examination. He peeled back an eyelid, shone a pinlight. He listened to the man's chest for a few seconds. He palpated the abdomen. Alara watched from the doorway of a supply closet, hidden in the shadows. She saw Finch's expression sour. It was the look of a connoisseur tasting a cheap wine. "Massive blunt force trauma," he declared, his voice booming with certainty. "Probable aortic rupture, severe internal bleeding. Look at him. He's a vagrant, probably drunk, fell asleep in the wrong place." He stripped off his gloves with a snap. "His pressure is in the toilet. He's not going to make it. Don't waste a primary OR on him. Stick him in trauma room 3. If he stabilizes, we'll see what we can do. But I'm not diverting resources from salvageable patients for this." His diagnosis was a death sentence. To be moved to a secondary room without immediate surgical prep was to be left to die. Dr. Evans nodded eagerly. "Of course, Chief. A waste of time." Brenda, the charge nurse, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Her eyes met Alara's across the bustling room. There was a flash of conflict in her expression, a flicker of doubt. But then it was gone, smothered by years of deference to authority. She directed 2 orderlies to move the John Doe. But Alara had seen something else, something Finch, in his arrogant haste, had missed entirely. As the gurney was being moved, the man's head had lolled to the side. For a single, fleeting moment, the harsh fluorescent light had caught a tiny mark on the side of his neck, just below the jawline. It wasn't a cut. It wasn't a bruise. It was a small, neat puncture wound, with 2 distinct points of entry, already surrounded by a faint, spidery web of discoloration. Her blood went cold. Every instinct in her body screamed. She had seen that mark before, in a dusty, sun-baked village in a forgotten corner of Afghanistan, on a special forces soldier who had been captured and interrogated. Her mind, the part she kept locked away, the part that was sharp and analytical and lightning fast, began to race. The shallow breathing, the low blood pressure, the subtle, almost imperceptible fasciculations in the muscles of his face, the slight, uneven dilation of his pupils that Finch had dismissed. It wasn't blunt force trauma, not primarily. The man was poisoned, and she knew the poison. It was a bespoke neurotoxin, an organophosphate derivative designed for covert operations. It mimicked the symptoms of massive internal injury, but it killed by paralyzing the diaphragm. The man on the gurney wasn't bleeding out. He was suffocating, slowly and inexorably. Finch's plan to wait would kill him in under 30 minutes. The ghost in the hallway had a choice to make. Stay quiet, stay hidden, and let a man die, or step out of the shadows. The memory of Finch's hand shoving her, of his voice dripping with contempt, flashed in her mind. Out. This was her line in the sand. She pushed herself off the wall and strode into the open. Her walk was different. There was no hesitation. Her head was up. Her eyes were clear and focused. She intercepted Brenda by the nurse's station. "Brenda, stop. Don't take him to Trauma 3. Brenda looked at her, startled by her tone. It was a voice she had never heard from Alara. It was calm, steady, and full of command. "Alara, what are you doing? Dr. Finch gave an order." "Dr. Finch is wrong," Alara said, her voice dropping lower, but losing none of its intensity. "He's not bleeding out. He's been poisoned. Look at his neck." She stepped toward the gurney as the orderlies paused, confused. She gently tilted the man's head. "There. A puncture wound. It's a nerve agent, organophosphate-based. If you leave him, he'll be dead in 30 minutes from respiratory failure." Finch, who had been speaking with another doctor, overheard her. He turned, his face a mask of thunderous rage. "Vance, I thought I told you to get off my floor." He strode toward her, his presence sucking all the air out of the space around him. "And now you're countermanding my direct orders? You, a worthless, incompetent scrub nurse, are telling me, the chief of surgery, that I have misdiagnosed a patient?" Alara stood her ground. She met his furious gaze without flinching. For the first time, he was seeing the person she really was, and the disconnect was so jarring it seemed to momentarily stun him. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing with a clarity that silenced the entire ER. "You are wrong, and if you follow your course of treatment, you will kill him." The arrogance in Finch's eyes curdled into pure hatred. "You are insane,"
he hissed. You are a delusional, hysterical woman. Brenda, call security. I want her removed from this hospital. Now. And you, he jabbed a finger at the orderlies, take this piece of trash to Trauma 3 and let him expire in peace. It was a direct order. A kill order, as far as Alara was concerned. As Finch turned his back, basking in the perceived victory of his authority, Alara made her move. Her entire being shifted. The timid, clumsy nurse evaporated, replaced by something honed and lethal.
Her movements became a study in brutal efficiency. Help me, she said to Chloe, the young nurse, who was staring at her with wide, shocked eyes. To her credit, Chloe didn't hesitate. Together, they grabbed the gurney. Instead of heading for Trauma 3, Alara steered it hard to the left, toward the empty, state-of-the-art resuscitation suite reserved for VIPs. Hey, one of the orderlies shouted. Where are you going? Override, Alara said, her voice a sharp command. She shoved the gurney through the double doors, Chloe right behind her. She hit the lock button on the keypad next to the door. A heavy magnetic thunk echoed as the doors sealed. They were locked in. Finch began pounding on the door from the outside. Vance, open this door. You are finished. Do you hear me? Finished. Alara ignored him. Her mind was a cold, clear machine, processing variables, assessing priorities. The patient's breathing was getting shallower. SpO2 was dropping. She turned to Chloe, who was pale and trembling. Chloe, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Chloe just nodded, speechless. Good. I need a central line kit, a ventilator, and the emergency drug tray. Now. Chloe, galvanized by her certainty, sprang into action. Alara turned to the automated medicine dispensary, a large, computerized cabinet. She needed the antidote. She knew the standard treatment was atropine and pralidoxime chloride, but she also knew that for this particular strain of toxin, the standard dose was useless. It required a massive, off-protocol bolus that would have killed a healthy person. The machine required a high-level authorization code for a dose that large, a code reserved for the chief of surgery or the head of pharmacology. She took a deep breath. Her fingers flew across the keypad. She entered a 9-digit alphanumeric code, a code she had learned from a Delta Force medic in a sweltering tent while they both worked to save a teammate who had been hit with a similar agent. A code she had no business knowing. There was a beep and a green light flashed. Access granted. A small drawer slid open, revealing several vials of concentrated atropine and pralidoxime. She didn't hesitate. She drew up the life-saving cocktail, her hands perfectly steady. The woman who couldn't handle an IV bag now worked with the supernatural grace of a master. Outside, the pounding had been replaced by the sound of a security keycard swiping, failing, then swiping again. Finch was screaming for a master key. Get that door open! Get it open now! Alara ignored the commotion. She expertly inserted the central line into the patient's subclavian vein, a procedure normally reserved for senior doctors. She pushed the first dose of the antidote. She glanced at the monitor. The patient's heart rate, which had been plummeting, began to stabilize. His oxygen saturation ticked up a percentage point. It was working. Just as Chloe finished connecting the ventilator, the door burst open. 2 burly security guards flanked a triumphant, apoplectic Dr. Finch. There she is, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Alara. Assaulting my staff, kidnapping a patient, practicing medicine without authority. I want her arrested. The guards moved in, grabbing Alara's arms. She didn't resist. She had done what she could. The patient was stabilized. For now. He had a chance. They dragged her out of the room, her feet scraping against the floor. Finch stepped in front of her, his face inches from hers, his eyes blazing with venomous fury. You are fired, he spat, flecks of spittle hitting her cheek. I am personally going to see to it that your nursing license is not just suspended, but permanently revoked. You will be blacklisted from every hospital in this country. You will never work in a medical facility again. You are nothing. He turned to the guards. Get her out of my building, and throw her belongings out after her. The guards were rough, pulling her through the crowded ER. The whispers followed her. Crazy. She finally snapped. Did you see her? She attacked Dr. Finch. She saw Brenda turn away, unable to meet her eyes. She saw Dr. Evans smirking. Only Chloe looked at her with something like awe and terror. They didn't stop at the locker room.
They dragged her straight to the main entrance and shoved her through the automatic doors. The cold, driving rain hit her instantly, plastering her thin scrubs to her skin. The doors slid shut behind her, sealing her out. She stood there for a moment, shivering, the sounds of the city muffled by the downpour. She had lost her job, her career, her quiet life. She had sacrificed everything for a man whose name she didn't even know. A profound sense of failure washed over her. She pulled her arms around herself and started walking, disappearing into the gray, weeping city. She didn't get more than 2 blocks. The sound was a visceral force before it was a noise. A deep, percussive whump, whump, whump that vibrated through the soles of her shoes, through the concrete sidewalk, up into her bones. It was a sound she knew intimately, the sound of heavy rotors beating the air into submission. She looked up, rain plastering her hair to her face. Descending out of the low gray clouds were 2 shapes, black and menacing against the sky. UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters. They weren't heading for a helipad. They were descending toward the highway that ran in front of the hospital, their landing lights cutting strobing, ethereal beams through the deluge. Cars screeched to a halt. Horns blared in a chaotic symphony of confusion and fear. The helicopters touched down with impossible grace, their rotor wash blasting water and debris in every direction, creating a miniature hurricane on the 6-lane interstate. Ropes dropped from their open doors, and figures clad in black tactical gear rappelled down with frightening speed and efficiency. They moved like a pack of wolves, securing the perimeter, their weapons held in a low, ready position. This wasn't a police action. This was military. Special operations. The lead team stormed the front entrance of Metropolis General, the glass doors sliding open to admit a terrifying new form of chaos. Patients in the waiting room screamed. The receptionist dove under her desk. The soldiers ignored them, their movements precise and purposeful. They weren't looking for a terrorist. They weren't looking for a bomb. The team leader, a captain with cold, professional eyes, approached the security desk. "We are looking for a woman," he said, his voice calm and clear over the din. "A nurse. They called her the Angel of Kandahar. We have confirmed she is in this facility." The head of security, the same man who had just thrown Alara out, looked at him, utterly baffled. "Angel? We don't have anyone by that name." Meanwhile, back on the rain-slicked street, Alara watched this impossible scene unfold, her mind struggling to process it. Why were they here? A black, unmarked SUV with government plates pulled up silently beside her, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. The back door opened. A man in a crisply pressed 4-star general's uniform stepped out, holding an umbrella. He was tall, with a face carved from granite, and eyes that held the weight of decades of command. He looked directly at her, his expression unreadable. "Nurse Alara Vance?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Alara just stared, shivering and dripping on the sidewalk. He took a step closer. "Or should I say, Staff Sergeant Vance, formerly of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. It's been a long time." Alara's breath hitched. He knew. He knew who she was. Who are you?" she stammered. "I am General Marcus Thorne, United States Air Force," he said. A flicker of pain crossed his stoic features. "The man you just saved, the John Doe, that is my son. Master Sergeant Kalen Thorne, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A Delta operator. His son. The general's gaze softened slightly. He was compromised during a deep cover operation. The intel we have says he was injected with a proprietary neurotoxin, a poison that our best people said was irreversible. And yet, my son is alive, because of you. Now, Sergeant, my son is still in danger, and you are the only person on this planet who seems to know how to keep him alive. So please, get in the car. We need you. Alara stood frozen for a beat. Then she nodded. She slid into the warm, dry interior of the SUV. The general got in beside her. He handed her a thick, dry towel. "The situation inside is being handled," he said grimly. The SUV pulled a smooth U-turn and headed back toward the hospital entrance, now cordoned off by soldiers. They walked back through the doors she had been thrown out of only minutes before. This time, she was not a pariah. She was flanked by a 4-star general and 2 commandos in full battle rattle. The scene in the ER was one of stunned silence. Everyone, from the doctors to the janitors, was standing frozen, watching the silent, intimidating soldiers. Dr. Finch was in the center of it all, trying to assert his authority over the military captain. "I am the chief of surgery in this hospital. You have no jurisdiction here. I demand you tell me what this is about." "This," General Thorne's voice boomed as they entered, "is about you." Finch spun around. His face, already red with fury, went bone white when he saw who was standing there. He saw the general's uniform, the 4 stars on his shoulder, and then he saw Alara, standing beside him, dry, wrapped in a military blanket, and looking at him with eyes that held no fear at all. Finch's jaw worked, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. General Thorne didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of absolute power. "Dr. Finch, I have just been informed by my staff that you ordered my son, a decorated operator of United States Special Operations Command, to be left in a hallway to die. I have also been informed that you fired, assaulted, and ejected the one person who correctly diagnosed his condition and saved his life." He took a step closer, his eyes like chips of ice. "So, as of this moment, you are relieved of all medical authority in this hospital. Your position, your title, mean nothing. The United States military is assuming full responsibility for Master Sergeant Thorne's care, and we are placing Sergeant Vance in complete command of that care." He turned to Alara. His voice softened, but was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sergeant, what do you require?" The entire room was staring at her, at the slow, clumsy, incompetent nurse who was now being called Sergeant and was being put in charge by a 4-star general. Alara looked at Finch, at his face, a mask of shattered pride and disbelief. Then she looked at the general. Her voice, when she spoke, was the one she had used in the resuscitation suite. Clear, calm, authoritative. "General, I need my patient moved to the surgical ICU. I need a full toxicology workup, but I need them to look for acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. I need continuous cardiac and respiratory monitoring. And I need Dr. Finch and anyone loyal to him kept away from my patient. They are a security risk." "Done," the general said without hesitation. He gestured to his captain. "Captain, you heard the sergeant. Make it happen. Establish a full guard on the ICU. No one gets in or out without her express permission." Finch finally found his voice, a strangled, incredulous squawk. "This is insane! You can't do this! I am the chief of surgery! I will sue! I will call the press!" General Thorne turned a look on him so cold it could have frozen fire. "You do that, doctor. It will make the court-martial for the negligent homicide of a special operator that much more public. Your career is over. The only question left is whether you end it as a disgraced civilian or as a federal prisoner." Finch recoiled as if he had been struck. He was utterly broken, defeated, humiliated in front of his entire staff, the very people he had tormented for years. Brenda was staring at Alara with a mixture of terror and profound respect. Chloe had tears in her eyes, a radiant smile on her face. Alara walked past Finch without a second glance. She had a patient to take care of. In the sterile quiet of the surgical ICU, with 2 armed soldiers standing guard outside the door, General Thorne explained the true stakes. "My son's team was tracking a man named Dmitry Volkov," he said, his voice low. "A former Russian chemical weapons specialist who went rogue. He's been selling his wares to terrorists and rogue states. He's developed a new generation of nerve agents, fast-acting, difficult to trace. Kale got close. Too close. He identified Volkov's primary buyer, a man high up in our own government." Alara's eyes widened. "A traitor?" "A very powerful one," the general confirmed grimly. "Before Kale was hit, he managed to secure Volkov's entire transaction list, including the buyer's name. It's on a bio-locked data chip surgically implanted in his forearm. It can only be accessed when he is conscious and by his own biometric signature. That's why they didn't just kill him. They tried to incapacitate him, to take him alive. When that failed, they left him for dead, assuming no one would identify the poison in time." "They assumed wrong," Alara said softly, checking the readouts on Kale's monitor. His vitals were stable, but fragile. The antidote was holding the toxin at bay, but it wasn't a cure. It was a stalemate. "Volkov's agent is designed to degrade slowly, to cause a cascade of organ failure over 48 hours, the general continued. The antidote you administered has paused that process, but we need to get him conscious to access that chip. We need to know who the buyer is before they realize Cale is alive and in our custody. A chill went down Alara's spine. They think he's dead. For now, the general said, but we are operating on borrowed time. Meanwhile, in his now useless office, Alistair Finch was making a call. His hands trembled not with fear, but with rage. His empire had been toppled in a matter of minutes by a mousy nurse he had despised on sight. His reputation was in tatters, but he was not without his own resources. He had connections. Shady connections. For years, he had been the go-to doctor for a certain import-export magnate, patching up men with gunshot wounds and making sure certain bodies disappeared from the morgue. It was lucrative work. He dialed a number from a burner phone. "It's me," he snarled when the call was answered. "We have a problem. The John Doe from the construction site. He's not dead. And he's not John Doe." He explained the situation, the arrival of the military, the takeover of his hospital. The voice on the other end was cold and calm. "Is the package secure?" "Yes," Finch said. "The military has him, but he's unconscious. They're keeping him alive." There was a pause. "This is a complication. The buyer is getting nervous. The package cannot be allowed to deliver its contents. You're on the inside, Doctor. You must fix this. The reward will be substantial. Enough to disappear and live like a king." Finch's eyes gleamed with greed and malice. This was more than just getting his power back. This was revenge. And a fortune. The nurse who saved him, this Sergeant Vance, she's in charge. They won't let me near him. "Then you will arrange for someone who can get near him," the voice said. "An anesthesiologist has been dispatched to your hospital to assist. His name is Dr. Peterson. Make sure he gets access to the patient. He will handle the rest." The line went dead. Finch smiled, a cruel, predatory expression. He was going to burn Alara Vance to the ground. An hour later, a man introducing himself as Dr. Peterson arrived, claiming to be a specialist in toxicological anesthesia sent from Walter Reed at the general's request. He had credentials that looked flawless. The general, wanting every possible expert on hand, was about to grant him access when Alara intervened. "Sir, with all due respect, I don't know this man. My patient is stable. Introducing a new variable right now is a risk." The general considered her words. "Your instincts have been flawless so far, Sergeant, but Peterson is one of the best." "Check his credentials again," Alara insisted. "Run his service number." While the general's aide made the call, Alara watched Dr. Peterson. He was calm, professional, but his eyes were wrong. They were constantly scanning, assessing angles, noting the positions of the guards. He wasn't a doctor. He was a predator. He was an operator, just like the men outside. The aide came back, his face pale. "Sir, Walter Reed has no Dr. Peterson on staff. That service number belongs to a quartermaster who retired 5 years ago. The credentials are fake." Before the guards could move, Peterson acted. He wasn't trying to get to Cale anymore. He was trying to get out. He moved with explosive speed, a ceramic blade appearing in his hand as if from nowhere. He lunged, not at the soldiers, but at Alara, the person who had made him. He was fast. But she was faster. The ER takedown was a reflex. This was muscle memory. Time seemed to slow down. She saw the arc of the blade, the glint of the light on its edge. She didn't retreat. She moved in, inside the arc of his arm. Her left hand deflected his wrist, her body turning with the momentum. Her right hand, formed into a rigid blade, struck him just below the rib cage, at the celiac plexus. All the air rushed out of his lungs in a choked gasp. As he staggered, she brought the heel of her palm up under his chin in a brutal, snapping motion. His head cracked back against the wall with a sickening thud. He slid to the floor, unconscious. The two commandos stared, their weapons half raised, their expressions a mixture of shock and professional admiration. Alara stood over the downed assassin, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a cold fire they recognized instantly. It was the look of a seasoned combatant. The mask of the quiet nurse was not just off,
It had been shattered into a million pieces. General Thorne looked from the unconscious assassin to Alara. "The hospital is compromised," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "They know he's here. We're moving." The evacuation was a masterclass in tactical precision. Within 10 minutes, Cale, still unconscious on a specialized transport gurney, was being wheeled through the hospital's service corridors. Alara walked beside him, monitoring his vitals on a portable unit, her focus absolute. They emerged not into the street, but into the underground parking garage, where a medical transport vehicle, essentially an armored ambulance, was waiting. They loaded Cale into the back. Alara and a combat medic got in with him. The general joined his commandos in the lead SUV. "We're going dark," the general's voice crackled over Alara's radio. "Heading to a secure site. Godspeed, Sergeant." The convoy sped out of the city, sirens silent, moving with a disciplined speed that defied civilian traffic laws. Alara worked in the back of the lurching vehicle, making micro-adjustments to Cale's life support. The other medic, a young sergeant named Reyes, watched her with open reverence. "I've heard stories about you, Sergeant Vance," he said quietly. "The Angel of Kandahar. They said you once kept 3 guys alive for 12 hours, with nothing but a roll of duct tape and a combat knife." Alara didn't look up from her work. "Stories get exaggerated," she said. "It was only 2 guys." Their destination was a remote cabin deep in the Allegheny National Forest, a place that didn't exist on any map. It was a designated safe house, hardened against attack, with its own power, water, and a small but sophisticated medical bay. For the next 24 hours, it was a fortress of solitude. Alara worked tirelessly, managing Cale's delicate biochemistry. She was no longer just a nurse or a sergeant. She was a biologist, a chemist, a neurologist, all focused on the single goal of pulling this one man back from the brink. The general coordinated with his intelligence teams, trying to hunt down Volkov and the traitor. On the second night, just as a sliver of moon rose over the dense canopy of trees, it happened. The perimeter sensors went off, a silent alarm that flashed on a monitor in the cabin's command center. "Contact," a soldier whispered into his comms. "Multiple hostiles, approaching from the north." The enemy had found them. Finch. The mole must have put a tracker on the gurney, or on one of their people. It didn't matter. The fight was here. The cabin, once a place of quiet sanctuary, instantly became a besieged fortress. The windows were shuttered with ballistic plates. The soldiers took up defensive positions. The silence of the forest was shattered by the crack of suppressed gunfire. General Thorne turned to Alara. "Can you keep him alive through this?" Alara looked at Cale, lying so still, then at the chaos erupting outside. "That's the only mission that matters, sir," she said. The firefight was intense. The attackers were not common thugs. They were mercenaries, well-trained and heavily armed. They moved with tactical discipline, trying to breach the cabin's defenses. For an hour, the battle raged. Inside, Alara was in her element. She was a whirlwind of controlled energy. She treated a soldier who took a round to the shoulder, packing the wound and applying a tourniquet with practiced ease. She reinforced a barricade. And through it all, she never let Cale's vitals dip. Then, the southern wall of the cabin exploded inward, a breaching charge. Smoke and debris filled the room. 2 mercenaries in black gear stormed through the hole, their rifles sweeping the room. The general and his men were pinned down on the other side of the cabin. Alara was alone in the medical bay with Cale. One of the mercenaries saw her. He raised his rifle. Cale, on the gurney, stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, his body still a prisoner of the toxin. But he saw the threat. A low groan escaped his lips. The mercenary grinned, seeing his primary target helpless. He took a step forward. He never took another. Alara had already moved. In the chaos of the breach, she had grabbed a fallen soldier's sidearm from the floor. She didn't hesitate. She didn't aim. She pointed. 2 shots, fired so close together they sounded like one. Crack, crack. 2 red blossoms appeared on the mercenary's chest, center mass. He staggered back, his eyes wide with surprise, and collapsed. The second mercenary swung his rifle toward her. Before he could fire, a single shot rang out from the doorway. The second attacker dropped. Cale, somehow, had pulled himself halfway up, his own sidearm, which had been holstered to his gurney, now in his hand. His arm was shaking violently, but his aim had been true.
He collapsed back onto the gurney, his eyes rolling back, the effort having cost him everything. Just as suddenly, the gunfire outside stopped. The sound of approaching vehicles and shouted commands in English filled the air. Reinforcements. The siege was over. Medics and soldiers flooded the cabin. As they secured the area, they found what they were looking for. The captured leader of the mercenary team, under intense persuasion from General Thorne, gave up his employer. He confirmed it. The entire operation, the poisoning, the hitman in the hospital, the siege, had been funded through a shell corporation that led directly to Dr. Alistair Finch, and they had the bank transfers to prove it. The next day, the scene shifted back to Metropolis General. Dr. Finch, believing he had succeeded, believing Cale Thorne and his guardian angel were dead in the woods, was holding a press conference in the hospital lobby. He stood at a podium, a picture of feigned sorrow and gravitas. "It is with a heavy heart," he began, his voice smooth and practiced, "that I must report on a tragic series of events. A deeply disturbed and unstable nurse, Ilara Vance, kidnapped a patient and fled the hospital with the help of what we now believe to be a rogue military unit. We are cooperating fully with authorities, but it is believed that their actions led to a violent confrontation in which all parties, including the patient, have been lost." He was about to continue, to paint himself as the hero who tried to stop the tragedy, when the main doors of the hospital lobby slid open. The reporters turned. A path cleared. General Marcus Thorne entered, flanked by military police. Behind him was a young nurse, Chloe, and a senior one, Brenda, both looking resolute. And behind them, pushed in a wheelchair but sitting upright, wearing a decorated Army service uniform, was Master Sergeant Calen Thorne. He was pale and weak, but his eyes were sharp and clear. And walking beside his wheelchair, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder, was Ilara Vance. She was no longer wearing scrubs. She was in a crisp Air Force dress uniform, her staff sergeant stripes gleaming under the lights. The scar on her forearm was visible, no longer hidden. It was a part of her story. A gasp went through the crowd of reporters. Finch froze at the podium, his face a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked at Cale. He looked at Ilara. He looked at the general. And he knew. He knew he was ruined. General Thorne walked directly to the podium, gently moving Finch aside as if he were a piece of furniture. "You will have to forgive Dr. Finch," the general said, his voice ringing through the silent lobby. "His account seems to be missing a few key details." He looked directly at Finch. "Tell me, Doctor, does the name Dmitry Volkov mean anything to you? Or perhaps a numbered bank account in the Cayman Islands?" The general's aide stepped forward and handed a dossier to the head of the city police, who had just arrived. "We have a signed confession from the mercenary commander you hired, Doctor. We have financial records linking you to a known terrorist arms dealer. And," he held up a small audio player, "we have a recording of your phone call, ordering the murder of a United States soldier." He pressed play. Finch's voice filled the lobby, panicked and greedy, arranging for the assassin. "Make sure he gets access to the patient. He will handle the rest." The color drained from Finch's face. He started to babble. "No, that's not... It's a fake. A deep fake. She's a liar. A crazy, vindictive liar." He pointed a trembling finger at Ilara, but no one was listening to him. The police were moving in. He tried to run, but they caught him. He began to scream, to weep, a pathetic, wailing sound that echoed his own shattered ego. "I am the chief of surgery. You can't do this to me." They dragged him away, his cries of innocence ignored by everyone. He was no longer a god. He was just a criminal. In the aftermath, the world seemed to right itself. The story was everywhere. Ilara Vance, the Angel of Kandahar, was a national hero. Her nursing license was reinstated with a formal apology from the state board. Brenda and Chloe both gave tearful interviews, praising Ilara's courage and apologizing for their own silence. Brenda resigned her position the next day, unable to face the shame. Chloe was promoted to charge nurse. The traitor in the government, exposed by the data on Cale's chip, was arrested in a quiet, early morning raid. A week later, in that same hospital lobby, General Thorne held another press conference. This time, the mood was celebratory. Ilara stood beside him, poised and confident. Cale stood on his own 2 feet next to her, still recovering, but smiling. Sergeant Alara Vance represents the very best of our armed forces, the general announced. Skill, integrity, and courage under fire. Her skills are a national asset, too valuable to be hidden away. He then turned to her. Sergeant Vance, on the authority of the President of the United States, I am hereby offering you a field commission to the rank of captain. Your mission will be to stand up and lead a new Joint Service Special Operations Medical Unit, a rapid response team for our most critical and unconventional medical emergencies, anywhere in the world. You will write the book. You will set the standard. You will answer to no one but me. The lobby erupted in applause. Alara looked at the general, then at Kale, who gave her a nod of profound encouragement. A genuine smile, the first one anyone here had ever seen, lit up her face. I accept, General, she said, her voice clear and strong. Her life as a ghost was over. Later that day, she walked out of Metropolis General for the last time. She left the oversized scrubs, the quiet desperation, and the painful memories in a locker. She walked out into the bright sunshine, wearing her uniform, a symbol of who she truly was. Kale was waiting for her. Ready for the next fight, Captain? He asked, his tone light, but his eyes full of deep respect and something more. I was born ready, Master Sergeant, she replied. They walked together toward the waiting military vehicle, a shared future of purpose and honor stretching out before them, leaving the shadows behind for good. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story of Alara Vance is a powerful reminder that true strength and competence are not always loud or visible. They often reside quietly in those who have been tested by fire. It teaches us to never judge a book by its cover, as the most unassuming person might just be the most capable one in the room. Furthermore, it highlights the importance of integrity and doing the right thing, even at great personal cost. Alara's defiance against a corrupt authority figure ultimately led to her vindication and triumph, proving that character is more valuable than status. In the end, doing the right thing always pays off, and true heroes are defined by their actions, not their titles. What would you have done if you were in Alara's shoes? Would you have risked everything to save a stranger? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Have a nice rest of your day.